Welcome to the Grow Podcast, where we feature Evergreen members and their real-life stories of salvation, transformation, struggle, and hope. I'm Kaylee Carter, and I have the pleasure of having Andrew Gabbert as a co-host today.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. And we are so excited to be interviewing Benjamin and Nina Whipple.
Hello.
Before we get started, just why don't you tell us who you are, how long you've been at Evergreen, and where you guys serve.
I'm Benjamin Whipple. I've been here for a little over 2.5 years, and we serve up in the venue.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about what the venue is for those that may not know?
Our own little community to do on Sundays upstairs.
It's the worship service during the second hour, simultaneous with the sanctuary service, and you receive the video feed of the sermon, but you have live worship, you have your own baptisms, the parent dedications, everything is live, except the sermon is the live video feed instead of Michael up there. So how long have you guys been serving up there?
Since it
opened, yeah. We've been there the whole time. Then before that, we took care of the 2-year-olds downstairs, 2 or 3-year-olds. On Wednesday nights for a year.
Tell us a little bit about the community up there and how it's different from maybe the sanctuary service.
Well, it's not as big. I like that I feel really plugged into the venue, and I'm like part of it, where I wasn't plugged in downstairs.
We will get started with your stories. So, Nina, we will start with you. So tell us just a little bit about your childhood and how you grew up.
I was raised in an awesome family. My mom and my dad, they've been married forever. Don't ask me how long because I can't remember. I have an older brother. I have a younger sister. So I'm the middle child. We grew up in Sapulpa. When I was really little, I remember going to church, raised in church, I think probably till like late elementary school. And I think kind of just around that time, it was a hassle to get 2 kids up and ready that were like, I don't want to go to church. I don't want to get up. And so I think it just kind of got a little harder on my mom of getting us up and getting us around. And so it seemed like we just kind of quit going. And then I remember kind of being in and out of church through middle school. And then by the time I got to high school, I had a really good friend who went to church every Sunday. And so I started going with her a lot.
Something happened when you were about 7 years old. Can you take us back to that and share that experience?
Yeah, so I was exposed to sexual abuse. After that happened, my grades in school kind of plummeted. I think there was a lot of just kind of not sure what was happening. It's not something I had told my parents about. I really had to spend more time focusing on school, and I had to quit playing sports just because of the grades dropping and all of that. And so that was really difficult. It wouldn't be until years later that I actually had went to counseling and made my dad go to counseling with me so I could share that with him. When I found out I was having a girl, I think all those feelings just kind of everything just surfaced. And it's like, oh my gosh, how can I prevent that from happening to my child?
What was your mindset as that was affecting your grades and other things? What kind of thoughts were you thinking to yourself?
Well, I was told that nobody would believe me. And so I think my mindset was, what does it matter? Nobody would believe me. So I felt like I just had done something wrong or something was my fault because that had happened to me, which is the furthest thing from the truth, but not knowing that until a lot later.
Was this experience something that you kept to yourself all of those years?
It was.
Until you shared with your parents?
It was.
And what was that like for you?
I think it just kind of making me feel that guilt and that shame, like, well, I did something wrong, it's my fault kind of thing. What could I do better so this doesn't keep happening? But going through that, I think it's really hard not to see that, like, at that age or quite understand, like, all of that stuff. So you just kind of stuff it and tuck it and just keep moving forward.
Now, you had made some comments to maybe your mom or both your parents about not wanting to go to school, but them not knowing the reason. Can you share with us just kind of what that led to, future school things?
I hated school. The kids were excessively mean. It just kind of all just started getting to be too much. I had told my mom, and I was in 8th grade, and I told my mom, if you send me to school there, whenever you come down to make your morning coffee, you're going to see me hanging in that tree outside. Because there's a great big tree right outside the window where the coffee pot is. And that's what I told her. And I was really glad that she believed me. I think she probably could tell the seriousness in my voice that I'm not going to go back there. Like, please don't make me. And so the best thing that she could have done was homeschool me, and she did. And it was great. A lot of things happened over that year. My self-esteem really increased. I think just having that time, and then school was easier because I was at home and only focusing on those things. So that got a lot better. So by the time I did go to high school, because I did go the following year to a new school, it was a lot better, and I was able to thrive.
There was something that happened in 6th grade. Can you share about that experience? And
My best friend, my grandma, she passed away, and it was hard. I didn't understand why God had to take her. And I think I asked for a long time before I got my answer of why. Because she was so good. I tell my kids all the time, like, you would have loved your grandma. She was great. So it was really hard. It was really, really hard when she passed. I remember having nightmares afterwards, and knowing that she was in a better place. She wasn't hurting anymore. She had cancer, and not understanding, like, what happens to somebody when they go through that. But it's like she was getting better. Her hair was starting to grow back. So we kind of just thought it was over, that she had beat it. I don't actually think that she died from the cancer. I think she died from a blood clot. I believe it was caused from the cancer and all just the treatments that she had gone through.
how did that shape just your relationships moving forward and into high school, where you were, more so pursuing the Lord and getting involved in church?
I questioned for a long time, why her? I don't understand. Why did it have to be her? It could have been anybody else. Well, maybe not anybody else, but, somebody else, just not her. And honestly, I don't think I really truly understood why it was her until I had the opportunity to really take care of the person that had sexually abused me. And I took care of him until he passed. And that is when I understood that he was still here because I needed to be able to forgive that little girl, and, to set her free from all of that, to let her know that those things weren't her fault. Even if I never got an apology from that person, mm-hmm. that it wasn't about him, it was more about me. But being able to set me free in that, and being able to set him free in that as well. Mm-hmm. And just that true forgiveness of what a picture of forgiveness really, truly looks like.
Mm-hmm. And was it your choice to take care of this person?
It was.
Okay.
It was. Mm. And it was kind of hard at first, but it ended up honestly being the best blessing mm-hmm. I could have had.
Providing real forgiveness and freedom, I'm sure,
yes.
in your life for so many years.
I mean, to me, it just reminds me of like all the stuff that happened to Jesus when he went to the cross, and how horrible people treated him. And for him to still get up on the cross and forgive everyone, that is the picture that I assumed when I had that.
It's a beautiful picture, and to think about, and to really, just be able to live out now because you've gotten to have that freedom. So
there are some things that we just can't learn by reading in a book.
So true.
We've got to just live through it, experience it for ourselves. And the Lord knows that. And sometimes we're upset with him for the things that he brings us through. But he brings us through it. He brings us through to the other side.
Oh, yeah.
And we learn so much in the process if we're paying attention.
Mm-hmm. It's going to look differently than we anticipate learning these lessons. And there's lots of uncomfortable emotions and discomfort, but the discipline that the Lord gives to us, you know, in those hard moments, like he's with us every step of the way, and how gracious of him to do that for us to get to the point where we are today and where you are today. So walk us back a little bit to your college years.
I started out in 2001 at UCO in Edmond, and I was there for about a year, and then I got married. A month later after I got married, I left and I moved to Okinawa, Japan, and I was there for 3 years, and then I moved back. During that 3 years, I'd gotten pregnant with my first child. Kind of when all of this stuff kind of surfaced and came up, I was grateful enough or blessed enough, either way, that I was able to come back to Oklahoma to have her and not have her over there. And so it was really plugged into a church here and growing, really learning, really seeking, kind of dealing with all of the stuff that happened from childhood through just kind of throughout that pregnancy. And so it was just a lot going on at that time. But our church was doing the purpose-driven life, so we were doing the 40 days. And through that, I had accepted Jesus then, and I was baptized. And so I always tell my daughter that she's been baptized twice, because she got it once while I was pregnant.
Yes. And what did this baptism mean to you?
Oh, it was real.
Mm-hmm.
What was that journey up to the moment in that time as you're approaching salvation, true salvation?
Well, it was intense. I was also, so at the time, I was going through a study called Making Peace with Your Past. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. So it's all biblically based. And so I was doing like a group therapy, essentially. And then I was doing individual therapy. I really think for a good 7 or 8 months, kind of leading up to that, and just, you know, being immersed just in a church and having community, all of that. It was just right. It was good. Mm-hmm. It was real.
And was your husband also involved in the same church community as well?
No. My ex was still living overseas when I came back here. I went through all of my healing kind of on my own. I was able to live with my parents, so I had them. I have a great support system. I was able just to kind of work through all of that healing. He was still overseas. He came back right before our daughter was born. And then he had moved on to Idaho, and I came up to Idaho about 8 months or so after, because he was being deployed again. And so it was when he got back from that deployment that I went up there to live. So I lived there for about 3 years. During that time, I got pregnant with my second child, and once again, he was deploying, and so I came home. While I was home, I went straight back to that church that I was at. It's like I never left. It was like home. You know, when you walk into the building, that feels like home. That's what it was. But while I was living in Idaho, though, I still went to church and trying to do all the right things and be a good parent. There was just some difficulties in that relationship that were not going to be fixed. And I think I realized that really early on. And it's really embarrassing and sad to say that I remember telling somebody when my second child was 2 that I'm probably not going to be married after they turn 18. I just did not want, I didn't want my kids to be without their parents, and so I was willing to endure that until they graduated high school, and then I'd already made the decision that I was not going to stay in that relationship because it wasn't good. But I was trying to do that for my kids, but that's not always the best thing. And so I had several people in my life who were like, why would you stay in a relationship just because of that, because it's not really healthy for your kids either. And I think that was kind of when I started thinking, okay, well, if these things don't change, then I'm going to have to follow through. And I think when I had asked for several changes to be made in our relationship, we had tried re-engage. We went through it. We even taught it. And it was just like it wasn't getting better. And so when I moved back to Oklahoma for the third time, he was living in Korea at the time. I was going back to my home church, and I just had peace. And I was like, okay, this is going to be one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I had asked for divorce. It wasn't without a lot of heartache and pain and hurt, and seeing that hurt in my kids. But it was for the better, because when your heart is hard and that person isn't allowing God to fix it, then it's an unyoked marriage. And that just wasn't going to happen. And so I really had to spend time grieving the loss of that. And I went back to counseling during that time. We were married for almost 15 years. So it was really hard. It was really hard just to say, okay, this is it. I'm finally going to pull the plug earlier than I had anticipated. And I think that was the hard part, of feeling like I had failed. I had let my family down. And so you kind of have all those feelings come back of the guilt, the shame. And so it was just really, really difficult.
You had told your family you had moved back to Oklahoma, and you were in school at this time, correct?
Yeah, so I kind of never quit going to school through this time. I had originally, way back when so I went through a year of UCO here, and then when I moved to Okinawa, I was able to do school full time through the University of Maryland. And so I did like 60 hours in 1 year, which is crazy.
That's a lot. That's so much.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was very, very intense. And so I pretty much just went to school all day. Like all day, all night. I did online classes while in conjunction with like sitting in a classroom to be able to get all those hours. I don't ever recommend anybody to do that. It's terrible. It's a very bad idea. And I was going for a history degree, and then I was 18 hours from finishing it, and I was like, what am I going to do with this? And I'm like, I don't even like this anymore. And so I took a year off just to kind of sit back and kind of say, what am I supposed to be doing? And obviously, with all these other things going on, is just fitting for God to intervene and be like, hello, I just want you to listen to me, please. And so he gave me this vision of me standing on a cliff and him saying, step out, just step out and trust me. And it was just kind of like I was stepping into his hand for him to be there to catch me. Through that whole time, I just really prayed and asked him what he wanted for me, what it was that, what am I going to do to serve you? And he was like, I want you to become a counselor. And I'm like, oh no, that's probably not a good idea. But it was so good. And it was so easy. And I think it's because obviously I'm listening to what God wants me to do. And so I think it just came easy because he gifted me with all of it.
The obedience, right? When we are obedient in the Lord, it is an easier, peaceful process, and doesn't mean that there's going to not be struggles on the way. He's there, and you know that that's the calling that he had for you. Okay, so you pursued your degree and you graduated. Can you walk us through a bit before you graduated, though?
So my mom, my sister, and I all graduated with our undergrad. Well, my mom in nursing school, but my sister and I both graduated with our bachelor's degrees the same year. And that very next year, I started my master's, and my sister was starting her master's as well before she went on to her medical. I did have a little mini meltdown graduating in December, starting classes for the master's in January. I do remember I had loaded myself down on classes. I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be fine. I've got this. And then I was like, oh, this is not like undergrad. This is like way more difficult. And so we went through and we kind of revamped how I was going to make it through the next 2 years. And so it worked out. It was really good. And then after that, it was not a struggle. It was like stress-free. And I finally finished 2 years later.
Talk about, real quick, just your support group at that time.
I had my mom and my dad and my sister and my brother. And then I could name each and every single person in my family, extended family, that were there. Finishing up, I lived in the house right down the street. The kids had a footpath from my house to mom and dad's house. And so we were all just right there together. I mean, just all of our family just kind of right there. So it was nice and pretty much get to anybody's house in about 15 minutes.
That's great. So we're kind of leading up to the moment when you actually meet Benjamin. So Benjamin, we're going to switch over to you and just share with us a little bit about your childhood and how you were raised.
I remember growing up in 3 different houses that my mom had, kind of always being like the kid left out. So I acted out a lot. And then whenever I got into 3rd grade, my mom had got connected with my stepdad, and his mom had passed away and gave her house to him. So we moved to Forest Park in Oklahoma City, which is like right on the edge of Midwest City. And I remember that pretty good. Went to school in Forest Park. I had 4 really good friends whenever I was growing up.
Can you talk about the dynamic at your mom's house and going over to your dad's house and the differences between that?
My mom and dad, of course, were divorced. Mom had custody of me and my sister, and we would go over to my dad's every other weekend. You know, we didn't know this was. We would go over to my dad's, and we would get there, and he would take us out to like the mall or Walmart, just places like that, and he would buy us board games. I remember we had like 30 or 40 board games, and then he would get me and my sister a toy, whatever we wanted, and so he would do that, and then he would take us back to the house, and 9 times out of 10 he would leave us there and go to the bar. Of course, when we were that young, we didn't know that that's what he was doing, and so me and my sister would be there by herself, and we didn't think too much about it, though. I mean, we had fun. He had cable TV, and we'd watch MTV, and you know, play with the kids in the neighborhood, and of course play with the games and the toys. We actually, I actually liked it because I felt like I was getting stuff. You know, it was all materialistic stuff. I was like, well, we'll go over to Dad's and he'll get us something. And it wasn't until years later that I had to deal with that whole thing. And then my mom's house, it was pretty rough. I can't remember a time where I like went without food or anything like that. You know, my stepdad was a severe alcoholic. My mom was alcoholic until I was probably 16 or 17. So there was a lot of fighting, a lot of physical fighting with my mom, with me, with my sister. I thought that was normal, you know, because my real dad was an alcoholic. And so whenever I went home, both of them were alcoholics. My real dad fought a lot. My mom and stepdad fought all the time. So I just thought it was normal and went through it, you know, picked up a lot of trades that they had, like how to deal with problems.
And how did seeing the way that your mom and stepdad interact form like the friendships you had at school?
You know, honestly, I really didn't have a lot of friends at school. I had 4 guys that I hung out with where I grew up. We didn't really have a lot of guidance, you know. I know me and one other one didn't have any. Like, we were literally allowed to do anything we wanted, and our parents didn't care. I didn't trust a lot of people, you know, because by the time I got into, like, school where you could build relationships with people, I think at that point, I had real bad trust issues. Like, I just felt like everybody was if they were being nice to me, they wanted something from me. So I was like, well, I'm not even dealing with that. I don't need any friends.
Now, there's a period of time in your early teens that you were exposed to church. Can you talk about kind of what led you to seeking that out and that time?
There was a church down the street from our house that my uncle and aunt went to. I think they might have invited me once, and I enjoyed it a lot. I actually started going on Wednesdays and Sundays. At a point, I really was thinking about pursuing like a youth pastor or something like that. The more and more that I went there, the more and more that it seemed like there was like a ladder. Like you had to make so much money or have a nice house and a nice car to be recognized. Once I saw that, I was done. I was done with God. I was done with church, because I just told myself that if that's what God's about, I don't want anything to do with it. And I stepped away from it. Stepped away from church. I still prayed, like your typical, I would say, person that doesn't really involved in church prays, God, give me this and I'll do this, or, stuff like that. Didn't really know what praying was or put any effort into it. But I did believe in God. I don't remember a time where I didn't believe in God.
What did your life look like after you stepped away from the church and leading into high school?
Me and a buddy of mine did a lot of bad stuff. I mean, anywhere from breaking into cars, stealing cars, breaking into houses, drinking. Never really got involved in drugs. Didn't want to mess with them. Drinking, I drank a little bit. I mean, I was drinking when I was 12 or 13 years old with my mom standing right next to me. I didn't care about authority. It didn't bother me, because the two people in my life that are supposed to have the most authority over me had none. When a teacher or a principal said something to me, I would just tell them whatever and do what I wanted to do. It got to a point where I would get in so much trouble that I would get kicked out of school. I think I got suspended like 18 times one year, and there was no direction on where my life was going at all. It was just whatever I woke up, whatever I feel like doing, I did. It really kind of sucks now, because if I could rewind it, I would have went to school every day and really focused on that part of my life, because I missed out on a lot of stuff.
There was a moment for you dropping out of school that you wanted to actually come back and graduate. So can you talk about that experience?
Me and my buddy, he had already dropped out, but there was some train tracks by the school and we were hanging out. I kind of looked up to him. He was just that person that I was like, I want to be like him, and I have no idea why, but that's what I did. So he was out of school, and I remember walking into school that day. I always wore a hat at school, and the principal came up to me and told me to take my hat off, and I told him to make me take my hat off, and of course he suspended me. And I went home and I was like, I'm done. I had a girlfriend then that was probably a really good thing at the time. Kind of pursued that relationship. Fast forward to after that year, senior year came, and I remember I was laying in my bed and I just wanted to, for some reason, I felt like I needed to go graduate. I tell people that it was because my sister got her GED and she was always better than me, that I wanted to go get my diploma so I could have something that she didn't have. So I went in and I told my mom that I wanted to go back to school. My principal at that time, she had gone to school with, and she just looked at me and told me no, she wasn't going to go back up there because she didn't want to be embarrassed, from him. So I found a way up there and talked to the principal, which this principal was my principal through junior high. And then whenever I moved to high school, he moved to be the principal at the high school. So he knew who I was. Sat in his office and talked to him and told him that I wanted to come back to school. And at first he told me no. And after talking to him for probably 30 minutes, I told him, I said, listen, if you let me come back and get my diploma, I'll be a ghost. I said, I won't talk to anybody. I'll come in and do school. There was no reason to believe what I was saying because of me and his past, but I was telling him the truth. And he didn't want to do it because I was bad, and I was really bad in junior high whenever he was my principal. I had a special ed teacher that had helped me with reading in 10th grade. Her name was Mrs. Hall. While I was meeting with him, she came in the office and walked behind me and looked at the principal and said, let him come back and he can stay in my room the whole day and we'll get him the credits that he needs to graduate. Me and her built a relationship that I had never had up to that point, to where I actually trusted an adult, knew that they had good intentions on what they were doing. So I think that woman saved my life. I mean, I really do.
You end up actually getting to graduate. Walk us through kind of after graduation and what your life looked like.
I actually moved up here to Tulsa and lived with one of the guys that I had grown up with. I just wanted to get away from my house. So I moved up here, and it was like perfect to me because I was living for free. I was making really good money. So I got to get whatever I wanted and do whatever I wanted. It was a good situation, but the problem is I never learned what it was really like to live on your own, because it seemed like every time that I would get into a living situation after I turned 18, it was pretty much easy. You know, I never really had to deal with like a $2,000 house payment or anything like that. So after a year, I ended up moving back down to live with my mom.
So at this point, is she still an alcoholic?
She's not alcoholic at this point. At this point, she is very much addicted to prescription pills. And my mom and my stepdad did weed my whole life. I can't remember a time whenever I wasn't around that. Through all this, I was with the same girl that I had met whenever I was like 17. We ended up getting a house out in El Reno, Oklahoma. I just wasn't right. You know, I had some stuff happen in high school with girls where I kind of made a promise to myself that I would just try to hurt as many girls as I could, because I got hurt. I lived that life to where my goal was just to get you to care about me. That way I could hurt you. And so that's how that relationship was. There was a lot of cheating. There was a lot of very toxic, you know.
And there was a time that you had actually gotten into a motorcycle accident. Is that right?
Me and that girl ended up separating whenever I was like 27, and the new girl I was with liked motorcycles, so I thought it would be a really good idea to grab a motorcycle. So I went to the safety class because I was scared to death of them. So I was like, well, I better take this class. And about a week into it, I ended up getting into a motorcycle wreck, busted up my leg pretty bad, and broke my shoulder. And the ambulance wanted to take me to the hospital, but I didn't want to go to the hospital. So I told them that I would just drive the motorcycle home. So I was only about a mile away from my house. So I got on the motorcycle and drove it home, and got home. And by that time I couldn't move my arm because I had broke my shoulder. But I guess whenever it happened, my adrenaline was so high that it didn't really affect me. So I told the girlfriend at the time, I said, hey, I probably need to go to the hospital. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to tell my mom. She looked at me and she said, well, before you go to the hospital, are you going to pay me rent? That was probably the wrong time to ask me for money, I guess. I gave her the money she wanted. And then whenever I walked out to get in my girlfriend's car, I told her, I said, I'm done with my mom. So I went to the hospital, ended up getting prescribed all kinds of pain medicine, and I don't take pain medicine. So I went back to my mom's because that's where I lived at the time. I remember I had to hide like my pain medicine because I was like, well, if I leave it out, she's going to take it. I had about, $10,000 that I had got from a settlement from a wreck. And it was so bad at my mom's house that the girlfriend I was with at the time, so I literally took $10,000 cash and handed to her mom and told her, hey, I need you to hold this for me because if I leave it at my house, my mom or my stepdad will steal it. It was the same thing with the pills. So I did that for 3 or 4 months until I was healed enough I moved back up here. Me and the girlfriend moved back up here, and I went and lived back over on Brookside because I liked it. That was 2009, I think, is when we moved back up here. We lived here and had a good time. Super toxic relationship again. Every one of them that I'd ever been in was just toxic, fighting a lot, cheating a lot.
So after that relationship ended, you had moved in with a friend of yours?
Yeah, I moved in with a guy that I'd met at school. I got into motorcycle mechanic school and met a guy there that was going through about the same thing. We had both helped our girlfriends get through school to get a degree or a certificate. And, a month after they get done, we decide to go to school, and they want to end the relationship. So we were both going through the same thing, almost identical. It was really weird. We were tight. It reminded me of my friend that I grew up with. We did everything together. I mean, we worked together. When we got off, we went and did whatever we wanted together. We were pretty tight. Lived with him for, I think, 4 years, and about 2 years into it is whenever I ended up getting a job at TCVH, and that's where I got in the mental health stuff.
And that's where it leads to you guys meeting. And from what I hear, Benjamin, it was love at first sight.
It was. I didn't meet her at TCBH. I worked there, and then I got a job at another place, and that's where I met her. And yeah, it was most definitely, she walked up to me, and it was most definitely love at first sight. I mean, I looked at her, and I was like, man, I want to marry her. Of course, I didn't say that out loud because she probably would have thought I was crazy. But she, and then she had a wedding ring on. So, I did a lot of cheating and all that, but that was the one thing that I never did, is I never would cheat with a married woman.
Yeah, so talk about the interactions you guys had together and how you guys ended up being together.
There was a group of us that worked on the unit, and we all became really close because, I mean, in that field, you're dealing with a lot of stuff that, first off, you can't really talk about it outside of work because of HIPAA and all that. You really only have that group of people to really talk to. I think that we just built a really good friendship. Often we would all go out to dinner, go bowling, played poker a lot. So we just built a really good relationship. But I had the feelings in me, but I didn't really know how she felt. We built a really solid foundation, as in like trust and all that stuff.
And Nina, what was your experience meeting Ben and having that friendship?
I think we just got along really well. I think at that time we just had a really fun group that we were hanging out with, which was really helpful, kind of for all my chaos that I was going through. I definitely don't think they all knew quite everything that I was going through until we had kind of really built that friendship and that trust. And then they were just also my added support system. With Ben, I think it was just part of that, just getting to know each other, just being friends.
Now, when you guys started dating, Nina, your family maybe was a little bit apprehensive about the relationship. Can you kind of talk about that?
So we just went ahead and did everything backwards. So when I got pregnant with Leo, I had flipped and rolled my car off a bridge. I had all 3 kids in the car because at that time I had no idea that I was even pregnant. We went to the hospital, obviously, to make sure that we were all okay. And that's when they were like, well, we can't do x-rays because you might be pregnant. And I was like, oh, okay. I think it was the next day my mom's like, why'd the doctor take you out in the hallway and talk to you? And I'm like, well, they said I might be pregnant. Bye, I gotta go. I can remember seeing her at the top of the stairs, and I bolted out the door. I was like, oh, I don't even want to have this conversation. And I'm done. Bye. I think, and I was like, and they said I might be. It's not for real. But turns out it was for real. And so I think at that point, just kind of, okay, my family being the family that they are just going to be supportive no matter what. And they kind of really, any indifference they had at that point, they just kind of set it aside.
What was your relationship with the Lord like at this time?
It was good. It wasn't great. I think, obviously, knowing right from wrong, all those things, like, oh my gosh, finding out you're pregnant, oh great, yay. It's not really the biblical way to do things. So not feeling as close, but not feeling any less loved. Like, it's going to be okay. He's not going to stop loving me because I did this. In reality, it ended up being a good thing because it brought Ben to my church.
Talk about that. What was go deeper into that.
Before she enrolled her car, I had told her that I never wanted to meet her parents. I was not interested in it because they all thought something was happening when nothing was happening. My mindset back then was, just angry and, I'll show you. Anyway, so she rolled her car, and that kind of changed the game whenever she told me that she was pregnant. And she had asked me, after all that, she had asked me to go fishing with her and her dad. So I was like, yeah, sure, man, if I get to hang out with you. Her dad had a guy with him that was fishing with him, and, I didn't think anything of it. I just thought it was a friend of his, which it was. The whole time we're out there, this guy is talking about how he got diagnosed with MS. In my mind, I just keep thinking how mad I would be, like how just full of anger I'd be if I got diagnosed with that. But he never acted mad or upset or, kind of acted like it was almost a blessing. I mean, I don't know if, not quite a blessing, but he didn't act like it was a bad thing. And I didn't understand that. I don't think I'd ever seen it before. And so it really shook me. We get done fishing. Her dad drops us off the boat. We get in the car, and I looked at her, and I was like, that guy, I don't understand how he's like that. I want to be like that. And that's whenever Nina told me that he was a pastor at her church. So I told her, I said, hey, if he's a pastor, I got to go listen to him preach. And that was the first time that I had walked into a church since I was probably 15. And I got involved in it and really, her parents ended up letting us move into their building. It was really like a perfect example of whenever you take yourself away from people that aren't good and put yourself around people that are good. The people go away, because eventually they don't want anything to do with you. But started building a relationship with her mom and her dad, going to church a lot, ended up getting baptized. I'd gotten saved whenever I was like 13 or 14, but I promised myself that I would never get baptized until I knew I could actually live that life.
You shared that Nina's mom was an instrumental influence in growing your faith. And can you talk about just what it was like having a mother figure like pour into you in that way?
At first, it was real weird because her mom will grab a Bible and start telling you verses, if she even needs to grab a Bible. So at first, I was very much that person that was like, oh, here we go. She's going to preach at me. The more and more me and her talked, the more and more that I started listening. And then whenever I started really trying to dive into it and learn about it, it became me and her would sit at the island and talk about the Bible. And me and her mom have grown a close relationship. Her mom is very much the reason that my faith is as strong as it is now.
What led you guys to come to Evergreen?
Our friend Carolyn, she had been watching sermons here. My mom, dad, and my sister had come to church here. That next Sunday, we came with them. The first Sunday we were here, I'm like, I think I've heard more scripture here than I have the entire past year at our other church. We just attended regular, didn't really get involved. We made the decision to, hey, we're going to try Sunday school. And so we ended up with AJ and Ashley, and we loved it. And so my mom and dad, they're in there with us. My cousins are in there with us.
Yeah.
Kind of like
you guys are like half the class.
Movement.
We had a room full last week.
We did. Yeah. And so when my sister moved back from Indiana, so now her and her husband, they're in there with us. And then we've just been getting plugged in and just kind of adding more. And Leo goes to Evergreen Academy. Love it. We absolutely love it. He loves it. He tells us all the time if he could live here, he would just live here 24/7.
I remember a few months back, you had a cool Sunday morning with Leo in the venue. You got to do something awesome with him. And it's related to his time at Evergreen Academy. And just kind of talk about that for a little bit.
So when we first started going to church here, we got him involved in Awanas. And so he kind of finished out the end of the year. We started that next year, like from the beginning, like Awanas from the beginning. And while he was going through that, he was like, hey, I asked Jesus to come live in my heart. And I'm like, yay. And then he was doing that like
every other day.
And I'm like, I don't think that's the way it has to work. And so we kind of just let it sit with that and be for a while, because we weren't I didn't want another situation like when I turned 8 to happen again. I was like, oh no. But he just kept on and on and on. And then when he started at Evergreen Academy, he was like, I told my teacher I accepted Jesus. And so then the teacher's calling me and I'm like, I know. We're trying to avoid this until he's a little older. And I think it was just one of those unavoidable things. He's just so smart and just so insightful. He's just learned so much here that if I had the foundation with church and school that he has, I definitely would have been like, hey, at 8, this is the real deal. But he definitely has that, and he knows. He does. He really tries to live his life for Jesus, even when he knows he makes mistakes and he messes up, and we talk about it, and we always point everything right back to Jesus, right back to the Bible.
His foundation was very important. I think Leo, this is a little bit backwards, but I think Leo is one of the people in my life that have shown me how good God is. Before he was born, I remember praying all the time that I just want him to be smart. I don't care if he's a football player. I don't care if he's the hottest guy out there. None of that matters. I just want him to be smart, because when I went through school, I wasn't smart. I struggled in a lot of different areas in school, and I remember getting bullied all the time for it, and I didn't want him to have that struggle. And so I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. If anybody knows Leo, I mean, he's, he can tell you just about anything about outer space, or I mean, he'll tell you about a planet that is 15 numbers long and is just like Earth that you've never even heard of, or the biggest star. There's a star named Betelgeuse that I had no idea. That was really a time where I sat down and I was like, man, that's a prayer answered, and then the whole journey to Evergreen Academy. I remember us coming up here and I was like, yeah, I want to get him out of public schools and put him in there. And, I remember we were worried about the financial part of it. And I remember one time I was at work, Jeff had sent me an email and the top of it said something that made me think that he wasn't going to be able to come here, or that it was going to be too expensive. And I was mad. I ended up leaving work and I drove home and I was crying and I was mad, and I told God I was mad. I was like, I'm trying to give you my son. I'm trying to let you do with what you want to do with him. Like, why are you doing this? Like, I've done everything that I feel like you've asked me to do with him. And went into the house and told Nina, still probably crying, and ended up, I read the email wrong, and it wasn't that at all. But yeah, it was another thing. I mean, even after he got accepted here, we were willing to sacrifice whatever we had to do to get him to come here. But you still worry, about, do we have enough money to pay bills, all that. And through it all, it's just been, God has just provided over and over and over. I mean, if it's, you need a certain amount of money, Nina would come in and be like, hey, I got a raise today, it's how, it'd be that amount of money, or, I would go to her and be like, I got a raise today, that amount of money, so it ended up, you can just see God's hand in it all the way, and
how did your childhoods affect the way that you now parent Leo? Because there's a contrast, especially Ben with your backstory. How did all of that impact how you're trying to be intentional with Leo?
I didn't have a lot of, I would say, like love. There was no hugs, no kisses, no I love yous. There was none of that in my house. So with me and Leo, I'm very intentional about that. Like I hug him, I kiss him, we tell each other we love, I love you. So that part I'm very intentional about. With him, we pick God first with him on all of it.
Maybe there's a parent listening today who has recently shifted or changed their approach to guiding their children into a more just intentional pursuit with the Lord. What encouragement or advice would you want to offer to them?
I would say with the adult children, we're still going through it, so I don't have all the answers. But not giving up and perseverance for sure. And I believe 100% that God is going to work it out. All of it. With Leo, I would just say once you've found Jesus and you have that foundation, don't stop pursuing it.
I think the biggest thing is just to trust that God is going to protect you no matter the situation, that as long as you put him first and look up to him for guidance and trust, he'll take care of you.
Now, you guys both work in mental health. What about someone who is not in church, someone who doesn't have a strong faith or maybe no faith at all? What would you say to someone who's just in the depths and really struggling? What kind of encouragement would you give them?
Let them see you, what you've been through, and that enough. I know whenever I dealt with teenagers and stuff, a lot of them would say stuff like that, like, well, my dad wasn't ever there for me, or my mom was addicted to drugs or anything, and they would use that as a scapegoat to act however they wanted. And so when we would sit down and have a conversation and they would find out that my background was almost identical to theirs, I think that opens that door, because in the field we're in, we're not really allowed to say anything biblical unless they ask. So that opens the door, and then once they start asking questions, I think that's whenever you can, really let them know, like, well, this is what changed my life. God did, and that's how I would handle that.
So with the hardships that you each have faced individually and as a couple, what would you say to someone that might be in a situation where they are finding it challenging to trust in God and his plan?
I would say reach out to your leadership. They're not going to guide you in a wrong direction. They're going to push you back to God's word. That has been, I think, our lifeline is just that, like, we're going to look at this from God's perspective,
Yeah, I think surrounding yourself with godly people is probably the most important thing you can do. You just have to have people around you that will lead you to that. That's one thing that that I've done in the past year that has really helped me. I've always had Teresa, there, or Jack, but I never had anybody in the church. And this past year I did Journey and, Man Venture and Mini Man Venture. And the whole point of that was to try to find godly men to be around me. That way, you can always have somebody there to point you back, because I think we all sometimes, stumble or fall or break or anything, and you have to have strong, godly people around you to pick you up, or to tell you that you're doing wrong. I mean, I've had a few of them tell me that I was being an idiot, and so that would be the biggest thing to me.
You got to be receptive and willing to listen to what they're saying.
Transparent, for sure, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and being on the podcast today. And just really appreciate you guys so much and hearing all what the Lord has done in your lives and changed you and continuing to do that. So thank you for your time.
Thank
you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you would like more information about our church, please visit our website at evergreenbc.org.